It was a dark, moonless night when Taehyung and his parents decided to take a different route home. They had just attended a family function and were eager to return to the comfort of their house. The main road was blocked due to construction, so they took a detour through a less traveled path. As they drove through the winding, narrow road, the headlights of their cars illuminated a figure lying on the roadside. Taehyung's mother, Mrs. Kim, gasped. "Stop the car, Taehyung!" she exclaimed. Mr. Kim pulled over and they rushed out to help the injured person. It was a girl, her head bleeding profusely. She looked pale and fragile, her clothes torn and dirty. The young knelt beside her, his heart pounding with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, but she did not respond. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she seemed disoriented. "We need to get her to a hospital," Mr. Kim said urgently. "No, let's take her home first," Mr. Kim suggested. "It's closer and we can call for help from there." Taehyung carefully lifted the girl into the car. She did not resist, but she also did not speak. They drove back to their house in tense silence, worry etched on their faces. When they reached home, they gently carried the girl inside and laid her on the couch. Mrs. Kim quickly fetched the first aid kit and began tending to the girl's wound. The young watched with growing concern. "Who do you think she is?" he asked. "I don't know," Mr. Kim replied, shaking his head, "but she seems to be in shock." Mr. Kim, Mrs. Kim nodded. She not saying anything. Maybe the head injury affected her ability to speak. They bandaged her wounds as best they could and made her comfortable. The young could not take his eyes off her. There was something about her that intrigued him, a mysterious aura that he could not quite place. "We should let her rest," Mr. Kim suggested. "Hopefully she's feel better in the morning." The young agreed, but he could not shake off the feelings of unease. He stayed by her side, watching over her as he slept, hoping she would wake up and tell them who she was and what had happened to her. The next few days passed quietly. The girl, who they began to call Vian, seemed to recover physically but still did not speak. The young and his parents assumed her silence was due to the trauma she had experienced. They treated her kindly, hoping to help her feel safe and comfortable. The young found himself growing attached to Vian. He would sit with her for hours, talking about anything and everything, hoping to elicit a response. She would listen, her eyes following his every move, but she remained silent. "She must have gone through something troubling," Mrs. Kim said one evening as she watched the young Vian from the kitchen. "I just wish she would say something," the young replied, a hymn of fractions in his voice. "Anything." "Give her time," Mrs. Kim advised. "She speak when she readies." But time did not seem to change anything. Wire remained silent, and the eerie feeling in the house grew stronger, so strong things began to happen. Objects would move on their own, and unexplained noise filled the night. The young's mother was the first to notice something truly unsettling. One day, while brushing her hair in front of the mirror, she realized that Ryan, who was standing right behind her, did not have a reflection. "The young," she screamed, dropping her brush. "He come running. What's wrong, Mom?" Mrs. Kim pointed at the mirror, her face pale with fear. "Look, she does not have a reflection." Taehyung turned to the mirror, his heart pounding. Indeed, Ryan stood there, but her image was absent in the glass. He felt a chill run down his spine. Are you sure, Mom? Taehyung asked, his voice shaking. I'm sure, Mrs. Kim insisted. There's something wrong with her. Mrs. Kim joined them, and Mr. Kim told him what he had seen. But he was skeptical. But he was skeptical. Maybe it's just a trick of the light, he suggested. No, I saw it, Mrs. Kim insisted. There's something wrong with that girl. The youngs did not want to believe it, but the eerie occurrences in the house were becoming harder to ignore. One night he woke up to this strange noise coming from the garden. He got off the bed and went to investigate. As he stepped outside, he saw Vian crouched in the garden, her back to him. His dog, Shiontan, lay motionless beside her. The young's heart dropped. Vian, what are you doing? He called out, his voice trembling. She slowly turned to face him, dripping from her mouth. She was eating Yonton. The young scream paced the night. His parents come running, horrified by the sight before them. Vine stood up, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and laughed manically. What have you done? Mrs. Kim cried, tears streaming down her face. Vian laughter grew louder, echoing through the night. You brought me here now. We will suffer. You will suffer. The young heart pounded in his chest. We need to get rid of her, he said, his voice shaking with fear. Mr. Kim nodded. We need to find someone who can help us. They packed a few essentials and left the house, driving to a nearby village where an old shaman lived. The shaman listened to their story, his face grave. The girl you brought into your home is not alive, he said. She died in that road accident, and what you have been living with in her spirit. Mrs. Kim gasped. What do we do? The shaman gave them a serious look. You need to go back to the place where you found her and burn her body. Only then will her spirit be at peace. Determined to end the nightmare, they returned to the spot where they had found Payan. They located her body still lying by the roadside and prepared to burn it. As they were about to light the fire, one spirit appeared, her face twisted with rage. You can't get rid of me, she screamed. She lunged off Mrs. Kim, wrapping her hands around her throat. The youngs acted quickly, grabbing the torch and setting the body ablaze, while spirit scrambling again as the flames confused her. Go back to where you come from, the young shouted, his voice filled with both fear and anger. While grip on Mrs. Kim loosed and she slowly began to fade. With one final blood-curdling scream, she disappeared into the night, leaving behind only the sound of cracking flames. Crackling flames. The family stood there for a moment, watching the fire burn. The sense of relief was palpable, but so was the exhausting and trauma of the experience. Is it over? Mrs. Kim asked, her voice trembling. I think so, the youngster replied, his heart still pounding. She's gone. They returned home, the house feeling earlier quiet but no longer oppressive. This strange occurrence ceased, and the airy feelings lifted. They slowly began to rebuild their lives, trying to put the horror behind them. Months passed and life started to regain a sense of normalcy. The young often true about violent feelings, a mix of sadness and relief. He hoped her spirit has finally found peace. One evening, as they were having dinner, Mrs. Kim spoke up. I know what we went through was terrifying, but I believe we did the right thing. Mr. Kim nodded. We helped a lost soul find peace. That's something to be proud of. Taehyung agreed, though he knew it was take time for the scars to heal. The experience has changed them all, bringing them closer together and making them appreciate the fragility of life. As the young lay in bed that night, he whispered a silent prayer for Vian, hoping she had found the peace she deserved. He knew the memories of those dark days would stay with him forever, but he also knew he had the strength to move forward. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes, letting the darkness of the night surround him, but no longer afraid. He was ready for whatever come next, knowing he had faced the worst and survived.